Welcome to the Perspectives with Catherine Toon podcast.
Well, hello, everybody. I am so happy to meet a new friend who I have admired from afar. Welcome, Jonathan Foster.
Thank you so much for having me on, and we're going to have a good time. I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah. And, honestly, I sort of connected with you through the Rethinking God with Tacos podcast, with Derek and Jason, who are amazing. And you were talking about a project that you're getting ready to come to publish. That was so touching. I said, I need this dude on the show. So anyway, tell us about your project.
That's nice. Thank you. Well, I'm good. I'm glad something good happened with Rethinking God with Tacos. So that's good. Yeah, no, those are good guys. Mm-hmm. So the current project, yes, it's called Indigo, the Color of Grief. And it is, well, gosh, it's 8.5 years in the making, although some of it may be a lot longer because some of it goes into theological things that I've been trying to reapproach my whole life. But certainly 8.5 years, almost 9 years, actually, as my daughter unfortunately died on New Year's Day, 2015. So yeah, coming up on 9 years. Wow. And so Indigo is an artistic dive into what I think is going on possibly with me and my identity and who God might be and how my theology is being morphed and transformed in the middle of all of it. And yeah, so it's kind of a special thing, and I'm really, really thankful. I really hate that I had to write it, but also I'm really thankful that I got to write it all at the same time.
Yeah, all of that. It's part of that redemptive thing that's going on with something that should have never happened, Right. Absolutely. So when is Indigo coming out? We're kind of starting from first, but that's
no worries. Officially December 5. Okay. So it can be pre-ordered as of this recording. But yeah, December 5 is when it lands in all the digital retailers. So that'll be the day.
Well, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know Jonathan, I did collect a bio, and I'm just going to read that just so you have a little sense of who. I love your bio. Your bio is a little bit like your book. I love the sort of you flow, and you like punctuation, by the wayside and whatever. It's poetic. I've never seen a poetic bio. That's a gift right there. So anyway, partner of one, father of three, been published, sold some books. I know that, I published and I sold a book. Yay. Mm-hmm. Right. Been writing for several years. I podcast, and I'm a lowercase t theologian with a doctorate in ORT and mimesis. So you're going to have to tell me what that is, but I'll just hold on. Let me finish and then I'll ask you. Favorite nonprofit. I love this. LoveHaiti.org. That's beautiful. Love to hike. Enjoyed pastoring for a long time, but went through a bunch of change because I went through a bunch of loss. We're going to talk about that. All that change messed with my theology, as it does. Then the religious system didn't want me. Ouch. And I understand. Which is absurd, but also I'm grateful for all of it. So love the bio. That's great. So just tell me, just so I'm following, what is ORT and mimesis?
Yeah, sorry, I went with the acronyms. ORT is Open and Relational Theology. If your listeners have heard of Thomas J. Oord, he's kind of he coined the phrase open and relational, and Tom's been a friend of mine for quite some time and started a doctoral program a few years ago. So I got to be the first to graduate, wow. Which, by the way, and it should distinguish, that doesn't mean I graduated top of my class, number one. It just means chronologically, I
made it through.
Right.
Number one.
Right. Okay. So that was cool. And so my dissertation is where I brought open and relational theology together with René Girard's mimetic theory.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just basically watched the sparks fly and tried to figure out, convergence and divergence. And that was a really cool thing. And it turned into a book called Theology of Consent, Mimetic Theory in an Open and Relational Universe, which came out last year.
Wow, that souns fascinating. I'm already going lots of places with that as you're talking about that. So, well, we kind of alluded to the rough stuff, multiple rough stuff. The hardest thing, of course, your daughter. So share a little bit of your journey that led up to this book, but just your journey in general.
Yeah.
In mind.
Right. So, man, there's just a lot of stuff. It's so funny. Recently, I've been doing some doing some work at a United Methodist Church across town here in Kansas City, and a friend of mine introduced me, and she said he's getting older, but he's low mileage.
That's lovely.
Which I thought was hilarious.
Wow.
So that's my current favorite. But I think the problem is I disagree with her. I feel like I'm high mileage. I feel like I've gone through so many things and had so many experiences. But yeah, my background, I grew up, my dad was a pastor. Both granddads were pastors. And so I kind of grew up Midwest, fairly evangelical, conservative, religious background. And most all of that was really, really good. I mean, legalism aside, I had a great set of parents and a pretty decent church life to grow up in. And then I started church planting myself. That part of pastoring was really interesting to me. And I was a musician in my former days, so always kind of been involved in that. But we started, it's been like a couple of decades of like one really significant subtraction from our life after another. Really just absurd, intense things. Some of that I barely touch upon on Indigo, but certainly the most intense then would have been our daughter in 2015. And we had just planted, this would have been my third church plant in 2013. So the church plant was only maybe a year and a half old and, full of, wasn't a big thing, maybe 150, a lot of young people, a lot of people who knew my kid and knew my boys. So to process that like in real time with a lot of other people while being a pastor was super interesting and challenging and complex. But so I started doing that, and I don't know, I feel like I'm rambling, but yeah, my theology shifted.
Enjoying your rambling.
What's that?
I said I'm enjoying your rambling.
Oh, good.
This is a good picture of you, so ramble away.
Yeah. I guess I should say, I had, like you mentioned, I have two other kids. We have two boys who are now 22 and 27, and I will be a grandpa in February.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
I know, I'm looking forward to that.
Wow.
And then as I was trying to figure out how to carry this idea, this loss, my thoughts about who God might be started to shift, and it really affected a lot of things, not the least of which is my posture towards LGBTQ plus. And so I don't think I was ever, I'd like to think I was not anti-LGBTQ, but I inherited a lot of stuff from my tradition that I just took for word. So when I challenged that, the denomination I was a part of ultimately decided I should go, and our whole church. I've actually never seen anything like that, where they just said me and the whole church. And that was in 2019.
Wow.
And then COVID hit, and a bunch of other stuff goes into that. So there's a lot of things in there, but maybe that gives a somewhat discombobulated sense of who I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think who we are is kind of discombobulated. Like if we can peg ourselves, we're really boring, superficial cardboard people, which we're not. Right. So that is totally fine. Now you have a poetic gift. You really do. Do you do poetry per se, or is this just kind of your style of expressing yourself?
Yeah, I try to write poetry. I mean, I'd like to think on good days that I could make a good poet, whatever that means. And I have a bunch of, probably like lots of different writers, bunch of different writings laying around on different hard drives and scraps of paper of stuff that I've written. Yeah. And a few things I try to insert into the writing. I'm really interested in the idea of theopoetics, which is just a mashup of
Okay, God poetry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a mashup of theology and poetry. And so people like Catherine Keller and John Caputo and those kinds of folks have been influential on my writing. Indigo, I go much more artistic and almost into poetry more than some of my other writing. But that the whole subject matter seemed to lend itself to that kind of thing.
Of course, this is not a dry discussion. It's a flow of the
Right.
heart, and
Right.
you're so transparent in that. And as I was engaging with your work, really felt all the shifts and the nuances and the confusion and the bafflement and the beauty and the horror and all of that just flowing. And it's kind of a journey through your process, and it's beautiful. But what it does is it challenges our own process and what the areas of grief that we have and the areas of questions we have about where is God, and we're going to talk about that in such a great way. So why did you pick the title Indigo?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Well, first of all, I just thought the word was evocative. And it's been a word that's just been bouncing around in the back of my brain for a couple of years. And then the more I thought about it, I really liked the symbolism of, like, what is indigo? Is it purple? Is it blue? Is it, it's this various gradation of all these different colors. I liked the direction it was going in terms of darkness, because the grief piece of it is darkness, but if you look at it the other way, it's going towards lightness. So I liked all of that. And then it does make a brief appearance in the book, so it's a bit of an Easter egg hunt. People can try to look for it in the book itself. So it wound up, I didn't set out for this to happen, but it wound up having like 3 or 4 different reasons. And I've had a lot of really good feedback about just the word itself. A lot of people were like, "Oh, I just like the title. I'm going to buy the book." So I'm like, okay, I guess we did a good job then.
It is so perfect. So it's not only evocative for you, it's evocative for anyone. And the name of the book is Indigo, the Color of Grief. And grief, how can you pin it down? How can you? Right. Is it all dark, but there's some light? Is what is that? And that's beautiful, and that's honest. And I think we always get in trouble with our hearts when we're trying to put things in a box and nail it down, because our hearts are mysterious, and God's mysterious, and life and death is mysterious. And so all of that, it deserves a mysterious, deep, deep color that you can't quite nail down. I love that. I was thinking, I wore this. This is not indigo, but it's heading that direction.
No, I just noticed that while you were talking. Like, that's very appropriate. I should have
it was
done
a God
better
thing.
myself.
I did it for the both of us. So
thank you.
Okay. Awesome. Well, so tell us a little bit about your daughter, who you lost and you love so much still.
Sure. So her name was Quincy. Her name is Quincy, and she would have been 29 this year, 30 next year. Quincy was just super unique, interesting person. She was very fiery when she was young. She she basically took years off of our life because she was so wild and undomesticated. We never quite got her domesticated, which adorable. I think is probably a good thing. When she was like 2 or 3, we lived in Arizona at the time, and I remember we were in the apartment complex, and we would, in the wintertime, often have the windows open. And when she would get in trouble, which happened frequently at that stage in her life, she would take off running and yell at the top of her lungs. She'd say, "Somebody help me, somebody help me." And it was alarming, because we just figured, I mean, she did this so much that my wife and I got to the point where we knew before we would discipline her, we would go make sure all the doors and windows and everything were closed, because we were just fearful someone would call CPS on us or something. So she was sinister and very smart, and she kind of, that's like a little bit of a microcosm of who she was. She just took that energy into her life, and she played soccer and she was a musician, and she was a nursing student, and was just full of life. Yeah.
Yeah, and is full of life now, right?
That's right. That's
Oh,
right.
I'm just wanted to read a little, let's see, a little bit from your book that described her. It says, "This is what we were used to. She was a force of life that could initiate and shape life in others, cousins, brothers, friends, wife, me, and then the force was gone. She died, and certain parts of us died." And so this is, boom, the hit in the gut where you need help breathing. Yeah. So now that was a car accident, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And you go in some detail just about how it hit you and your thinking process, or I'm not thinking process, as you encounter that. And you kind of go back and forth in the story about from younger to, that. And so, and you had mentioned at one time, and I so appreciate this. And I actually listened to the Rethinking God with Tacos thing, and you all mentioned Elie Wiesel's, and I have no idea if I'm saying that correct, iconic book, Night. It hit me so hard. I actually went off, purchased it, and read it that day. It is such a, oh my God, powerful book.
Yeah.
And this had a huge impact in your processing. You started, as I understand, you started reading that before you got the news. And then when you got the news, it had all sorts of implications for you. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. And by the way, lots of us are unsure about how to pronounce his name. So I've heard it multiple different ways, but I usually say Elie Wiesel.
Wiesel. Oh, that sounds better. I like the pronunciation on it.
I don't know if it's right, but that's what I normally
I think
say.
it's more flattering. Good job.
Yeah. So Elie Wiesel was a Pulitzer Prize winning author after he went through what he went through at Auschwitz, where his family and most of his community were drug away to that concentration camp and killed. And his work is it's an amazing book. It's not overly long. It's pretty sparse, and clearly not only because of the story that happened, which I'll share in just a moment, but even just his style of writing has influenced me, and Indigo is connected to it in some way, because things like Night and other authors that we could talk about if we wanted, but I've always found it to be interesting that some of these people can say so much with so little. And I think Elie Wiesel is one of those kinds of authors. Mm-hmm. So, and the other thing I'll mention too about how his style influenced me is he doesn't really offer any ultimate answers. He just tells the story, but there's something really beautiful about the humanity that he's exposing and expressing as he tells the story. So yeah, I think Night is one of the most important works, certainly of the last century and maybe for a long time.
Yeah.
But the direct connection to Indigo, as you mentioned, was the morning of, this would have been New Year's Day 2015. I was reading Night, and I was reading the story in there where Elie Wiesel and his co-prisoners, whatever we call them, were forced by the Nazis to march underneath 3 Jewish men who were hanging. Actually, I think they were young boys.
Yeah.
And it's it's absurd, ridiculous story. And as they walk underneath, Elie Wiesel hears a voice crying from behind him that asks, "Where is God?" And then the next thing that Wiesel hears is, and I think he's hearing this in his own voice. I'm not sure he's hearing an audible voice, but in his own head and heart, he hears, "Where is God? He's hanging there on the gallows with those boys." So I read that morning, and not unlike thousands and millions of people who've read that story probably, but certainly with me, I just stopped and I closed the book, and I just remember looking out over, I was at my mother-in-law's farmhouse looking out the window across the really gray morning and thinking how this is just weird. It's absurd what some people have had to go through, and
mind-blowing. Mm-hmm.
Mind-blowing. Yeah, you just really can't quite wrap your mind around it. And so fast forwarding through the day, that call and response echoed back and forth in my heart and my mind at various times throughout the day. I wasn't trying to think about it, but I wasn't trying not to think about it. But, I'd be doing the dishes and I'd hear, "Where is God?" And then the response, "Where is God? He's hanging on the gallows with those boys." Though a couple of different times, probably because of my Christian heritage, I would think he's hanging on the cross,
Yeah.
with all of us or something like that.
With
And so that
humanity.
happened. Right, exactly. So that happened several times throughout the day. And then, we got the news at about 4:30. We had a suspicion that something had happened, but we didn't officially get the news until later that night after sunset. And then as I'm packing the car up, we decided to head home after that. That same call and response began to happen in my mind. Where was God? And then the response I heard was, "Where is God? He was in the car dying with Quincy." And yeah, that was a strange, awkward, holy, terrible, really beautiful moment that in some ways, that's really all I've been trying to do for almost 9 years, is to figure out like what the expletive does that mean, and how does it.
You can explicit.
Okay. I'm not a very good cursor, so sometimes I just have to use that. Yeah, what does that mean? And who am I in the midst of that, and all the implications? So
yeah. Well, and then also with Quincy's dad and with Quincy's mom, as they got the news, right? I mean, this how do you survive that? How do you survive that? You survive that. Yeah. How did you, in your journey, and you bring a lot of really deep thoughts, how did you keep yourself from going in the darkness, or did you go in the darkness of just angry at God? How could you let this happen to my little girl? I know she was a big girl, but she's a little girl.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I never really personally felt angry at God.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I know some people have thought that I did, and they've interpreted my theological changes as, "Oh, you're just angry at God, so you have to lash out or do whatever." Right. Which I don't think is right. First of all, I should say, I'm not sure any of us ever know what our real motivations are. We're
complex.
We're complex, and we're all influenced by others. And so, but to the best of my ability, I don't think I was ever mad at God. But the word you started to say, darkness, I think you used that word. That was a very appropriate word. There's been a lot of really dark, heavy, heavy moments of just trying to figure out how to carry this thing. And so, so that has just been the reality. And one of the things I've tried to do all along is to not deny that. I am grateful for some of the other stuff we went through previously, not for the events themselves, but for what I learned. And one of the things I learned years ago was, contrary to the way I was raised, either in my church or within the middle of American consumeristic, capitalistic society, contrary to all of that, which says, that we're supposed to be overcomers and victorious and constantly winning and these kinds of things, which in and of themselves, some of those things aren't wrong or bad. But I had a steady diet of that. And not only did I have a steady diet of it, I think I probably cultivated it some myself. So it's not necessarily the fault of everyone else. It's a combination of those things. And so by the time this thing with Quincy rolled around, I had learned my lesson, if that's the right way to say it. Probably not, but I had learned of the concept of, I'm not going to go into this thing thinking about how I can be a winner, and how I can dominate this thing and power up and use it for God's glory or whatever. It was just, and it still is, though it's taken on different forms now. It was just this really heavy, dark thing that that I've just tried to figure out how to carry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of that, you quoted from the movie Wind River, and I thought I'd quote it because it's so good. And I actually haven't seen the movie, so I look forward to checking that out at some point. But it says, the main character looks straight at his friend, says, point is, Martin, you can't steer from the pain. If you do, you'll rob yourself. You'll rob yourself of every memory of her, every last one, from her first step to her last smile. It will kill them all. Just take the pain, Martin. You hear me? You take it. It's the only way you'll keep her with you. And you said, sounds about right. So embracing the pain means something precious was here and is not here. And we know she's in heaven. Yeah. But she's not there where you can reach out and grab her, give her a hug, all that. And so taking the pain and learning to carry the pain, because, I do a ton of coaching, and I just hear these, how are you not, like mowing down people in the mall, right? With your story, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
How are you a good person who has any sort of semblance of, of goodness in the universe? So it's amazing to see the resiliency of people. And any pointers in carrying the pain for someone who, is maybe just stuck into some real grief. Maybe it's fresh. Maybe they have, suppressed it, and now it's kind of coming back to haunt them, or maybe they're just feeling it. Any insights? And we're not looking for the answers, because carrying pain is never easy.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's a really important question, how to help encourage people to carry it, because to deny it is, well, I started to say it's not viable. I mean, it might be viable for a short season. Yeah. And the reality is some of these things are so traumatic and so hard that some people have to carry that. Some people do learn how to compartmentalize. And the last thing I would want to do is to, cast shame upon that, because
you don't rip open their compartments when
they're
not ready.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think, giving yourself grace to just be wherever you're at. But an idea that has helped me is the idea that the pain of this thing really never goes away. What I think is happening is that my heart is getting bigger. So the pain stays the same, but the heart gets bigger. And so then the question for me has always been, well, how do I help get the heart bigger? How do I grow the interiority of who I am? And it's funny, because when I was younger, if I would have had this kind of conversation, I would have been capable, which I probably wouldn't have been, but I would have thought, oh, well, you read your Bible more, and you go to church more faithfully, and you give more. And that maybe not. But now it's funny. It's basically like just like, how's your sleep? Do you ever think about breathing?
Breathing's good.
How about, what about eating and exercising? Like, if I don't get out just about every day and take a hike when I'm in the mountains, unfortunately right now I'm in Kansas City, so I can't really take a hike in the hills, but kind of. But that movement, that is how I've helped grow the interiority. And I know that's not a real spiritual answer, but it also is kind of like
it's a very spiritual answer.
It really is kind
how
of.
How do you help your heart grow? It's like, I'm moving, I exist.
Yeah.
There's life still. There's hope still.
Yeah.
Even if I don't see it.
And some days it's some days there's nothing too extraordinary about it. It's just like, oh, I got to get up and move. Other days I think about it as I'm moving. I think about exercise is an exorcise, the way I exorcise the demons, so to speak. And I just think about the blood movement and the oxygen and the breathing and the inhale of what I thought life was going to be, and the exhale of letting go of those expectations. And so on those days, it really gets more intense. And then other days it's just, no, I just need to take a nap.
Yeah. Naps are good.
Naps are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant. I think that's a whole lot more profound than maybe people realize, because it is an attitude of continuing life. Self-care is important. I mean, we're given one commandment to love as God loves, where we love the one that's not here with us, but loving ourselves is also loving her and loving the God who created her and you. And it's a cry of hope. I grabbed this quote because I thought it was so incredible. It says, "What is life if not beauty's pursuit at the edge of the grave?" And the truth is, none of us are going to get out of this life alive the way we've known it, right? We believe in eternal life, yes, all of that, but not in the way that we've known it. And even just moving through life, we get these like curveballs that take us, but there's a pursuit of something beautiful, even while the grave is there. But the value of life is highlighted when it's not eternal the way we know it. It's precious. And so it's a celebration of the preciousness of life, the preciousness of people, the preciousness of all that is beautiful, made by a beautiful creator, right on the razor's edge of death. And theologically, Jesus bridged the gap. He overcame death, hell, and the grave. All of that, knowing him is eternal life. All of that, but in that relationship, there's something beautiful, even as we're butting up against that. And that's a incredibly hopeful, incredibly powerful, and incredibly beautiful. You did mention to some, and I think this might be helpful because we're talking about grief. There are some things that aren't helpful. And not all of us have the same emotional intelligence. And some of us are just dumber than rocks. And some of us say stupid things because we don't know what to say, or we say nothing because we don't know what to say. And sometimes nothing's actually a really good idea. But not avoiding people in their grief. Anything you want to highlight with that?
Yeah. I think that, well, I'll say it this way, and I think I may say something like this in the book. What I discovered a long time ago was that the intensity of my problems was reminding people of the intensity of their problems. And so just by virtue of me being in conversation with them, we may not even be talking about the problem, I could tell it was making them nervous and anxious. By the way, I should say, maybe I just could be making people nervous and anxious for other reasons too. But definitely the whole and it's funny, even with this book, I recognize that some people don't even want to read it because they're not prepared to go there.
Right.
And so I keep encouraging them to read it, because even if you haven't lost a kid, because we've all experienced loss. We all know the loss of a relationship or the loss of some dream that we had, So it's a very, it's a very existential, troubling thing for folks. And so when you go through things, you'll have friends and acquaintances and others who, as you said, they don't really know what to say, but I do think most people mean well.
Yeah.
But I would also agree with you that it's probably better, if you don't know what to say, to not say anything, because some of these things, there really isn't anything you can say to fix it. But yes, totally agree. That doesn't mean you would avoid them. It just means that you're now being invited to enter into their pain with them, to walk through hell with them, which I think theologically is such a really great picture of what the story tells us that seemed to happen with Jesus. Like, there's this long history of the things that took place immediately following the death of Jesus. There's not a ton of biblical verses, but in First Peter there's some, in Hebrews there's some. Matthew has one little short verse, but this whole idea that Jesus descended into death or Hades or Sheol or whatever it might be, and begin to share the hope in the good news. So I just love that picture of Jesus being with people no matter where they're at, which, by the way, if this is true, it means there is no God-forsaken place in the entire cosmos.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
We say he's omnipresent, but then we make him not omnipresent. So which is it?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I tell people, listen, he makes his bed in hell or Sheol, the realm of the dead, to get the people to hell out of hell. So there's not a hell hole that Jesus is not deeper with. And just sometimes he'll hang out with you in your hell hole.
Yeah.
Eventually to get you the hell out of hell.
Right. And let's see, what's the best way to say this? You may not, I want to say something like you may not get out of hell for a while. I mean, I would encourage anyone not to stay in hell, but sometimes these things, hell is, again, complex. There's a lot of complicated reasons why we wind up. There isn't just one reason. And sometimes, like in the context of what we're talking about today, you don't even ask to be there.
Right.
And to rush out too quickly to try to get out of it to find God is antithetical to the biblical story. The biblical story, as you said, is God went there.
Yeah.
I just think that's so cool, and it's so worth, like, we could write a million books and still not mine the really interesting stuff. So anyhow, your question, sorry to try to answer it. Yeah, there are some things.
Great.
It's all good stuff.
Stupid question. If you got something better to say than my question, just say the better thing.
No. I'm just following the rabbit trails in my mind. But yeah, there are certain things that people said that after a while I started to connect the dots, and I'm like, I'm not sure they really believe that, but I know I don't. Like, I mean, a big one is everything happens for a reason. Again, people mean well, and they're just trying to figure out how to cope with their own stuff. But I actually don't think everything happens for a reason, because then that slots God into some master programmer who has, pulling the levers, pushing the buttons, started the code that makes everything happen the way it does. And if God authored the death of anyone, I think that's it's highly problematic.
Because he doesn't take life. So I mean, so he doesn't take life. So that's not a God idea. Death happens.
Right. And so
God took it.
Right. And then it invites you to then think, well, what do I think is going on? And then you kind of have to it's more nuanced than that. You have to start thinking in less black and white and more gray, which a lot of people, our religious systems, unfortunately, haven't taught us how to do that very well.
We do not like mystery. We do not like indigo. We don't want to name it black, blue, purple.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so true.
It is so true. So yeah, and you actually wrote quite a bit on hell, which I thought was incredible. I wrote down quite a bit. I don't think I'm going to read it, but I like the ending part. Okay, I just love this so much. I'm sorry. This just makes me happy. What I think is that hell needs a hug. Hell needs a hug. And you need a hug in hell. Hugging's good. Hugging's very good. It's kind of funny because there was a season earlier on in my development, whatever, when I had all these hell encounters. It was just, I'd get visions. I was constantly, I'm like, I'm back. Like, did I not get it the first time? Apparently I didn't. I needed this season, but I will say I've learned more in hell than I have any place else. Who God is, who I am, and what he's able to do in redeeming things, but not in the way that I would have orchestrated it. We have to be careful that we don't impose on God an expectation that he's not authoring. He's not obligated to fulfill an expectation, but he is who he is. And so good will happen eventually. Beauty will happen eventually, as we're connecting with him. But I am, that's profound, because if God is in the process of redeeming all things, then hell gets to be redeemed. And in whatever that is. And we get to be redeemed in our hell stories But I agree with you. If we get this this Western Christian concept of, we got to overcome, we got to be victorious. Well, Christ was, and he said, as you remain in me, me and you, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So his victory is our victory, but we may not look super victorious in our grief. We may be crippled, but God will do something in the crippling. Not that he authored the crippling, right, but he will do something beautiful in the crippling. But we need to hold it loosely, because we get into trouble when we start to have a specific expectation of what that needs to look like. In order for me to stay saved, Jesus, this has got to happen. Well, he's actually the author of your salvation. So that's kind of on right there. But he's not obligated to jump through the hoops of our expectations, but we can grapple with God about keeping an expectancy of something good and beautiful in the midst of unspeakably ugly. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you in what you're saying.
I like it. I feel like we should take an offering.
All right, go ahead. Here's the thing. Yeah. Oh, wow. What else do you want to share about your thoughts? And we brought up quite a bit on God. You changed your ideas of God, and it started off with embracing the LGBTQ community, and I'm just assuming just humanity. And that got you in a lot of hot water, which was probably, let the chips fall where they may as you follow Christ. But it's painful to be rejected, particularly in the kind of outrageous left foot of fellowship you got.
Right.
That's painful. Other things that you want to share about who you've discovered God to be that's maybe been surprising or something in this process?
Yeah, there's been a lot of really meaningful, I started to say fun. I don't know if it's fun, but it's been really meaningful, enjoyable, poignant things that I've discovered. And I think I'll just try to narrow it down. Like, I've just been trying to stay committed and recommit myself to the idea that God might be love, which is not only biblical, philosophically, it seems to make sense. Biblically, it seems to make sense. But what it asked me to do was to kind of redefine the concept of love. And so it's interesting because now when I talk about love, and this is true with a lot of different theological words, when I talk about love, in my mind, when I say love, I think of this non-binary, non-violent, non-scapegoating blessing / energy in relationship to God and others. Well, each one of those things are like intentional, and I used to just talk about love and assume it was whatever, and what wound up happening is eventually love would get co-opted by either wrath or power or hell or justice or sacrifice or omnipotence. And so part of my journey has been rewiring, unwinding the way I've been wound so that I could rewind, if that's the right word, so I could reorient myself around the concept of love. And by the way, I could be wrong. It's possible, because there is a way to read the Bible and there's a way to interpret life to think that there might be other things at play. But what I think is that love is the most, like Teilhard de Chardin says, is the core energy of the cosmos. And I think I want to be committed to that. I think that still makes the most sense. So when you asked, are there other things you want to say about God? Like, that to me is the primary thing. So I think the essence of God is love. And that's been, I would have probably said that 10 years ago.
It's scriptural.
It's scriptural.
Yes.
But I probably would have done the whole, like, I'm sure you can relate to this, people will say, well, God is love, but
he's wrath.
And so what I do now is I say God is love, and
love looks like a lot of things.
And it's not a but, it's not something else supersedes it.
Yeah.
But I think that is the fundamental essence of love. And open and relational theology has helped me with that a lot. Mimetic theory has helped me a lot with the scapegoating piece. So maybe I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think just a recommitment to a God of love, that's been really enjoyable to deeply study it, and to be coming out the other end after hours and hours of reading and praying and staring at the ceiling and talking with smart people and thinking about it. And you're still at this really simplistic, in some ways, thing. Oh yeah, no, God is love. It's crazy.
Well, I cannot be. I've been sitting on my hands because it's such a hot button for me. Anytime I'm teaching, it's all about God is love. I tell people I'll get off that when we get it. So nothing's going to happen soon. And I get a lot of flack for that. But yeah, I don't care, because he is who he is. And it's interesting, as a little girl, because I was a deep thinker too, and I had a lot of tragedy in my life, yada yada. And I remember trying to, because I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and I was trying to get my mind around, when you boil it down, what is the essence of meaning? Where can you boil it down and you can't reduce it anymore? And I had encounters with God, but I didn't know who he was. I just knew that he loved me and I loved him, which is really good theology.
Right.
And later, we went traveling in Europe, and I saw him on a cross. I was like, that's the man I had encounters with. So I started out in a really pure way, went sideways for a long time, but this thing that would not let me go was this person who was love. He just wouldn't do it. And I'd give him the flying finger, and he'd be like, babe, when you're ready to come back, I'm here. Yeah. I'm like, la, 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 I can't hear you, whatever. But that's the person that was in pursuit. So everything can be boiled down to that. And so understanding that rightly is a place, and I hope you don't hear this wrong way, but you're so adorable to say, I think that I think, because I love your humility. It's like, I'm thinking, but my thinker could be off. And yes, all of us. I've just butted up against this puppy so much, I can't get deeper than that. And God is not correcting me. It just comes back to that over and over. But what it does is it turns back on itself and becomes so much greater, such a greater revelation that love is holding all things, love is redeeming all things to himself. So my first book that I wrote, I just referred to God. I referred to love as the person of God, partly because so many people are triggered by the G word, right? And so, and we've done a really crappy job at inclusivity in the church. So we're getting better, we're getting better. But it's been such a trigger word. So that's helped people make some, and also get you out of I know. It's kind of making mistakes on purpose, so to get people to think like, wait, what did you say? Wait, what is that? Right? To force us out of, especially of our little religious boxes, or honestly past our trauma, that we bypass trauma where we can't hear anymore. Right. And your book is so beautiful. So if anybody's like afraid that, there's pathos, there's real grief. It is a book on grief. And, but I just think that we're big girls and big boys, that we can pull up our big girl boy panties and dive in there. If people are really trying to avoid their own grief, that may be a book for later. And maybe it's a book for now, so that you start to deal with it, so you can actually live. People get stuck in their grief when they don't allow it to be expressed, where you don't take the pain, as like I said. So
take the pain. Yeah,
that's amazing. But there's something beautiful in that. There's something really powerful in that. And how's your family been? Have they gone through a similar journey? Everybody has their own thing, but you didn't go through this in a vacuum.
Yeah, my partner and I, we've been married 33 years. And as these things always go theologically, well, pretty much anything, I tend to go through it quicker. She tends to go a little bit slower, but that's not bad. That's neither good nor bad. In fact, if anything, the quick part gets me in trouble sometimes. But thankfully, we've been pretty connected. And theologically, we were disassembling and reassembling around some of the same themes. So I'm really grateful for that. And I'm also like eternally grateful to have also done this with our boys, who again were 12 and 17 when it happened. And were very, very much a part of our little church plant up until the time they all went to college and even beyond that. So I'm really honored to have done it with them. And not that we all agree on every single thing, but there's a lot of shared common denominators and shared common value over love and reworking the whole thing. They were very much with me as I got the uninvited from the tribe, and I was really paying close attention, especially to the boys, about how they were processing that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm really grateful for all that. And I know that that's not true of all families. And by the way, it's not true of me and some of my extended family. I definitely, there was a lot of estimation that was lost in terms of what some family members thought of me. But the four of us and my boys, the girls that they're with, yeah, we seem to be good. So I'm grateful for that.
That's incredibly, that's incredibly powerful. That's beautiful to be able to go through as a family. Obviously you don't agree on everything, but I don't agree with myself on everything. So
right.
we're looking for one another.
Yeah. I don't even think I agree with some of the stuff I said to you today. So you're right. That's how it works. But it seems we're, like I say in the book, we're 4/5. We'll never be 5/5 quite again. But I think it's a pretty cool little story that's happening.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So your book's coming out December 5th, you said, correct?
That's right.
And then it'll be available on all the outlets and things.
All the things. It'll be physical, digital, audio. It'll be on the Amazons and Kobos and Barnes and Nobles and Apples and all those places.
Lovely. Wonderful. Well, you guys definitely want to get that. Where can people contact you if they're wanting to connect with you?
Sure. Well, the easiest way is just to go to my website, jonathanfosteronline.com. And there you can learn about, some of the other stuff, and maybe sign up to my Substack page and learn about Love Haiti, our organization there. And yeah, it'd be fun to connect with people that way.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about this Love Haiti, because I should have checked into that, but I didn't. So this is a hot button. So feel free to talk about your hot button.
Yeah, so my daughter was planning to be a medical missionary to Haiti, and I'd taken one small trip down there, but it had been really impactful on her. And so after she died, we were trying to figure out different things, basically just to try to process life. And one of the ideas we landed upon pretty quickly was to go down and build a soccer field. So we went into the remote area of the Southeast Haiti. Beautiful, beautiful country, but it's a train wreck. Essentially, it's been a train wreck sociologically since 1492 when Columbus landed there, and that was the beginning of the end for the indigenous people and some of the folks in the New World. But at any rate, the last 8.5 years that we went to build a soccer field, it turned into something else, and now we do healthcare, education. We have schools, we support teachers. We're literally getting doctors and nurses consistently into parts of that world that have never had that consistent help. We do wealth creation. There's a ton of stuff that's really, really meaningful that's going on. And it's the hardest work and the best work that I do. And it's, yeah, that's probably the way to say it. It's super hard. And some days I wish I'd never heard of Haiti, because it's so heavy.
Yeah.
But then most days I'm like, no, this is great, man. I'm glad to be helping it. So yeah, thanks for asking that. And if people are interested, they can check out lovehaiti.org.
Yeah, wonderful. Awesome. Well, any final closing thoughts that you have?
I have so many thoughts, so we better not get going. I'll just
just go into a second hour.
Yeah, we don't have time for that. But thank you very much for having me on, and for reading the book and responding to it the way you did. And hopefully, lots of other people will do the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, really, really get your copy. This is a really, let me put it this way, a really worthwhile book. Really worthwhile. It's not one you want to, you want to savor. It's kind of an encounter. And it's beautiful. So absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been a delight. Even on a heavy topic, it's delightful. So
that's right.
Something.
That's right.
That really says something.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, yeah, it's been my pleasure. Everyone, share this with someone who needs it, and we will catch you later. Thank you once again. Bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Perspectives with Catherine Toon. For additional information and resources, please visit catherinetoon.com.